Maybe. Nice. Yay.
And microphone. Okay, we're good. We're
Yay.
good. Okay.
Awesome.
So, I just want to begin by thanking you for doing this again.
Sure, no worries.
This semester we're really trying to kind of revamp the English department and
Mm,
create really kind of a broader conversation that involves alumni, students, and really kind of welcoming a number of perspectives on
oh,
not
cool.
just employability, but also sort of what we think about being an English major because we love it so much. So that's
Yeah.
something we're really trying to do. So the questions that I sent you, I guess we'll
Mm,
just start with general introductions, if that's okay.
sure. Yeah.
So if you could first just state your name and your year of graduation.
Sure. I'm Ellen Howes and I graduated in spring 2016.
Okay. And what did you study, including your majors? And
Okay, sure. So fully, I double majored in English and comparative literature and then got a certificate in medieval studies.
awesome.
Yeah.
And what is your current place of employment? So where did you end up working after you graduated?
So currently, I am employed at the National Museum of Women in the Arts down in Washington, D.C.
That's so cool. And if you could just also begin by sort of talking a little bit about what your job includes and what other sort of things you've done for them.
Sure, yeah. My job, it's pretty administrative assistant-y, so lots of phone calls, lots of emails, tracking expenses, but then there's also a more personal side to it. I'm helping to kind of cultivate and solicit donors and work with artists, which is really cool. So doing a lot of acknowledgement writing, lots of letter writing. So yeah.
Yeah, so administrative, but also kind of more interactive too, which it must be very fun to do.
Yeah, that's the part of it I like. I'm like, I know the budget's important, but
Yeah, and
yeah.
so do you work for the deputy director or the director
Deputy
themselves? Oh, the
director. Yep.
deputy director. But
Yeah.
that's still such an interesting job. I mean, I
Yeah.
love that we have like an English major who goes on to do this really cool for such a cool museum too. I love that we have a museum specifically for that subject.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And a lot of people are like, well, why can't we just like put them in the walls of the National Gallery? Why does it have to be a separate museum? I'm like, well, yeah, yeah,
Because we have this history that's sort of ignored a lot of those subjects and
yeah,
artists. Exactly.
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so a little bit. So what we'll sort of do is kind of start with your academic experiences, and then work more
Mhm.
towards kind of more substantive questions about your career.
Sure.
So when did you enroll in the English major? Did you go in studying it or?
I actually came into UMass as undeclared. I was pretty certain, though, I wanted to be an English major, but for some reason I was like, I don't want to restrict myself. But then, about a month into my first semester, I became an English major. So, yeah,
Yeah.
and um, coming out of high school, after taking AP English, I really kind of fell in love with it. And I was like, oh, wow, if I can do more of this, like, why wouldn't I? So yeah, about a month after starting at UMass. I
And then when did you decide to pursue like the medieval studies certificate, and
mm,
then also your comparative literature major?
yeah, so let's see. Um, for Complet, I think that wasn't really until my junior year. I had taken so Complet and the medieval studies certificate kind of started with the same thing. There was a comparative literature course being offered on medieval studies literature. I was like, ooh, that sounds cool. I don't really know anything about that. And I think we all think of like knights and King Arthur and things like that. And so I was curious to learn more of what was in that range of history and literature. And so as I continued with that, I also began to realize that the Complet department offered some courses that I had wished were in the English department. I think one of the most popular Complet classes, there's one on dystopian literature, and that brings in a lot of people because I think it's a gen ed course. And I remember going through on Spire. because my friend who was a bio major had taken that. And she was like, yeah, it's a literature course. And so I assumed it was in the English department. I was scrolling through, and I was like, I can't find this cool sounding class. And it was in Comp Lit. Um, and so as I kind of started taking a look at more classes there, I realized that they really complemented the English major very well. And that the one class that really stood out to me was literary or history of literary theory and criticism. And I was able to apply so much of that to my courses in the English department and really kind of broaden what I was learning there. And so that was really wonderful. And then medieval studies, Professor Jenny Adams in the English department, she and also Professor Harris, who teaches a lot of like Beowulf and Old English classes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were kind of like, oh, well, there's this thing, the certificate in medieval studies. And at this point, I had taken like that Comp Lit class, I had taken a Vikings class, I had taken Beowulf. And so I
Right.
was like, oh, well, sure, like, why not? This is obviously something that interests me. I might as well do the few extra things that are required for that.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
And so it's kind of, if I'm sort of interpreting what
Yeah.
Complet kind of offered you a way of like kind of broadening your experience with English a little bit and kind of finding things that maybe, were still related to the study of literature, but maybe not necessarily in your department. Is that?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was kind of the whole College of Humanities and Fine Arts working together because I don't think, that the English department, uh, oh shoot, I'm forgetting what it's called. But when you're new to the major and you go to the lecture hall and kind of get the
Yeah.
introduction.
The
Um,
200 induction or like introduction. I forgot.
yeah,
New
yeah,
majors something or other. I think the name changes every
yeah.
single time, but yeah.
But I don't think that the medieval studies certificate was mentioned at that because it wasn't specific to the English department. It wasn't like the creative writing certificate that you can
Mm-hmm.
get. It's um, interdisciplinary, interdepartmental. And so, yeah, it definitely allows you to kind of broaden what courses you can take.
Yeah. And so, speaking from sort of my own experience, because I'm also a double major, and
Yeah.
part of the reason why I pursued my second major of art history was also kind of, I mean, I adore the English department, but I did sometimes find it to be a little, not lacking is such a strong word, but like I just wanted more. I mean, did you
Yeah.
ever sort of find yourself, I mean, did your sort of desire to kind of expand things a little bit come from a desire for more, or was it just sort of like, I'm interested in this thing and it's not being offered here? But did you ever maybe kind of struggle with the major a little bit and want it to kind of be bigger for you, if that makes sense? If that question.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's kind of a little bit of those two things was I was curious for more and I could find it elsewhere outside of the department. But then once I had, like, especially going back to that course on literary theory and criticism, like it was a difficult class, but it was
Mm-hmm.
still one that I'm so grateful I took. And so, again, when I went back to taking English courses, I was just like, why don't other English students take this? This is so important to what we're learning.
Exactly. Yeah,
Like,
exactly. I
yeah,
mean,
and
I,
so that was exactly.
yeah, and kind of just almost wanting, like, I don't know, just like finding myself in an English class and just being like, you would so love this other course or this other subject in the
Mhm.
humanities. Like, you would benefit so
Yeah.
strongly from it. So, that kind of idea of just wanting everyone to expand their horizons a little bit.
Yes,
Um,
definitely.
yeah, that's amazing, though. um, so, in kind of one of our sort of transitory questions, sort of what we're thinking of as part of this internship. And we're sort of kind of trying to rebrand this question that I think a lot of people in the humanities are asked often, which is, well, what are you going to do with that?
Oh yeah.
Um, which is a question that I find particularly obnoxious, especially because I think it's sometimes I don't know, people I've just met. Um,
Yeah.
but how would you or
Mm.
did you respond to the question, well, what are you going to do with that?
Yeah. Um, I would actually get a combo of what are you going to do with that? Or like, oh, so you're going to be an English teacher? Like, I feel like that's also the
That
default
was we actually
question.
talked about that too, because that's that's definitely part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And like that's such a noble profession, but it was just like, nope, not for me. So yeah, when people would ask, oh, what are you going to do with that? And especially if they would say in a bit of a snarky tone, like, oh, you could do such more practical things or whatever, I would say, well, every foundation, every nonprofit, every school needs a grant writer. Every ad that you watch has someone writing those jingles and those copies. Like, your radio show has copy editors. The news that you watch, the school closings or the headlines going across the screen has someone writing that up. Every aspect of every company, organization, etc., has some kind of creative or editorial or written need, and an English major can fill that spot.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
and what you said about, I mean, when you first started listing like nonprofits, I mean, there's just so
Mm,
many organizations out there, which I think is
yeah.
which is why I'm almost kind of surprised by that question, because it's like there's so many opportunities, there's so much going on.
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
and I just want people to pay more attention to that, because there's so much out there. I mean, which isn't to say that, we have a wealth of opportunities and that everyone has equal
Mm,
access to those opportunities, but there's
absolutely.
really just, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It's an
Yeah.
interesting question, but
Mhm.
I think it also, I don't know, when I think of nonprofits and some of these organizations, like when I think of the Museum of Women in the Arts, which is such a
Mm,
really noble organization and such a really phenomenal organization.
yeah.
I think of also just, and then this sort of plays into my next question. What do
Sure.
you think is the value of the English major? I mean,
Mm,
not just in terms of getting the employability factor, but also, I mean, why does it matter? I guess. I mean, we all
sure.
sort of decide to pursue this major for a reason, and I guess just why do you think? I mean, especially in sort of this turbulent time that we're in now,
Mm,
why
totally.
does it matter?
Yeah. I think, especially given our current time, the ability to think critically is probably um, one of the biggest values of the English major or of any humanities major. But I think the faculty in the English department at UMass do a really great job of getting their students to think individually and critically and deeply about certain subjects. Um, and so, yeah, I think that that's something you can carry into any job, any situation in which you find yourself. Being able to read a piece of news or watch a movie or have a conversation with someone and kind of analyze the broader themes or even more minute details of what's being said and put them into a broader context and apply them in various ways. Um, and I also think, like for myself in my current job at the Museum of Women in the Arts, like I said, it has its more administrative side. But part of that also, I like it's kind of like, whoa, because I'm helping the deputy director with some of her bigger donors that she cultivates and stuff. And so,
Mm,
a name will pop up in my email. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm emailing this
yeah.
person. And yeah,
Like,
yeah,
you know my name.
yeah,
You know my
yeah.
first name.
And
Yeah.
so, having knowing how to come across uh, or knowing what tone to address people with or to write out a letter in, being very diplomatic. I think that's also something that you learn as you get into your junior and senior year and you're writing longer papers and you're reading deeper works of literature. Understanding tone is huge
Yeah.
in
No, for sure.
the real world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and like that's because I feel like I've worked in so many offices throughout my life, and just being able to know how to talk to someone in a professional way, but also in a very just human way, I think is another thing
Absolutely.
about it. That kind of always remembering that you're talking to someone who is also a person, who is also,
Hmm.
deserves those sorts of questions.
Yeah,
Yeah, no,
yeah,
I think everything about that, and I don't know, I just really kind of thinking about this time period exactly, and sort of the critical kind of engagement, even I think even more so critical engagement with the world around us that I think you really get
yes,
from humanities education.
yeah,
Um, yeah, so now kind of onto the more career oriented
sure.
questions. One thing that we were talking about in sort of our intern collective was that I was sort of even the idea of, applying to jobs and kind of,
Mm,
what that entails. And I guess it just, and I know we spoke a little bit during our time in Oxford, with what you were sort of planning on doing after. But how did you feel just applying, going through the
mm,
application process? I mean, did you find it daunting? Did you
mm.
find it sort of similar to kind of, just how you may have had jobs before, or
Sure.
overwhelming?
Definitely daunting.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But I think daunting, but you're gonna be okay.
Yeah.
Everyone has had to go through this process. You can find
Right. Yeah.
people who've been in your shoes before, so it's not like you're alone in doing this for the first time. The jobs that I've had before were um, babysitting, working in retail, and then working for the Oxford Summer Seminar. And so
Yeah.
those, like babysitting and retail, are kind of, I feel like they're a separate application process, really, like either through word of mouth, or you can just walk into a department store and be like, hey, saw you guys had a help wanted sign, can I get an application? It's very just kind of quick, easy,
Yeah.
sort of thing. But starting to look for jobs post graduation, kind of just typing into Google, like jobs in Washington, D.C., or like museum jobs in Washington, D.C. Like you kind of don't
Yeah.
know where to start sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And so, just hours of scrolling through Indeed.com, that's going to happen, and that's okay. And
Yeah.
you never know what might turn up. But then also not being shy about reaching out to professors or peers who are maybe a few who have graduated already, or even parents of friends and stuff, and saying, hey, you work in a field that's remotely something that I'm interested in. Do you have anyone that I can talk to?
Yeah. Just anything.
Yeah, yeah. Informational interviews will go a long way,
Yeah.
and they're so important. So,
Yeah. And I like that you said both utilizing the resources that you have. I mean, kind of,
mm-hmm.
coming out of UMass and having professors who've maybe, professors, friends who've
Yeah.
graduated, things like that, but also just typing into Google, like,
Yeah.
kind of just doing the search yourself of just like, please,
Yeah,
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 like a
absolutely.
job anywhere, yeah, um,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of sort of a little thinking about kind of preparing. Did you know that you wanted to go into museums specifically, or was it also kind of, I know you were relocating to DC, but was it just sort of creative employment in DC, or were you, or actually, kind of throwing it back even more, was museum work something that you thought of as you were going through college too? I mean, or was it kind of, I mean, when did you really kind of decide that you wanted to go into that field, maybe?
Sure. It was definitely not something that had occurred to me during college. I hadn't really even considered museums as a point of like getting to, or as a career, which is strange because they're such hubs of cultural
Yeah.
and human experience and culture.
Yeah.
I said culture twice, but whatever.
It
um,
still sounded great. I mean,
Thanks. But yeah, and so it wasn't until towards the end of our summer at Oxford that I was like, oh, these are a thing. And
yeah.
um, my my boyfriend's mother uh, is a director of a museum in Massachusetts, and so I just kind of went to her and was like, tell me about what it is that you do. I'm kind of like I know that DC has lots of museums and I want to work in a creative space. That was really my goal for post graduation was
Was a
I want to
creative
work in some
space.
kind of a creative space. And so she was able to answer some of my questions and connect me with different people, and that grew into where I am now.
Oh, wonderful. And
Yeah.
sort of the final kind of career question. I mean, do you feel that your English education really prepared you for this career? I mean, was it kind of, I know having worked in sort of administrative capacity, sometimes it's just, oh, okay, yeah, of course I can do that. Or some of it's just sort of intuitive. But I mean,
Mm,
do you feel that you've really benefited from your English department, your English major kind of going into where you are now?
absolutely, I think so. Again, just from typing up thank you letters for a donation that's been made, I'm able to um, kind of create something that's perhaps a bit more appealing or thoughtful than what is generated from the computer in our database, or even something that I was telling my employers about. It's the Museum of Women in the Arts, so it's obviously a pretty feminist workspace. And my introduction to feminist theory and idea and just that field of thought entirely was through a literature course and a medieval literature course nonetheless.
Yeah.
And so just
An interesting
which
time
people are
for
like,
an
really? I'm like, yeah,
interesting time for
actually.
women. Yeah.
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 um, and so, you never know kind of how the wealth of knowledge that you gain from this department is going to pop back up.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it's really kind of wonderful. And while you might not always notice, like, yes, um, I can apply this knowledge that I have from my 18th century American literature course
Yeah.
to this. Like that's not going to be a direct correlation all the time, but the
Hmm.
general, um, again, the critical thinking, the tone, being able to adapt yourself to different needs and really kind of show like humanity and cultural dialogues and exploration of these dialogues and narratives matter. Like you are going to be able to apply those things in what you do.
Yeah. And even I know that this is sort of because it's difficult to quantify this. It's always sort of a
Mm.
problem to kind of present this, but understanding, which I think you get from
Mm.
anything that you read, any
Yeah.
narrative you explore, I think just really goes a long way into making you a better worker, into making you a better, coworker, into making you just a better,
Yeah.
really just a more capable person, I would say. I mean, I think
Mm.
that's kind of why I really, feel like I'm made into a better person with each thing that I read, each, narrative I'm introduced to, which I think is,
Absolutely.
think is really important for work experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I love that you were introduced to sort of the idea of women in a museum space through like a medieval context. I think that's amazing.
Yeah.
It's really
Yeah. It was like gender and sexuality in the Middle Ages or something
yeah,
like
phenomenal.
totally. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so just kind of moving into our final questions, which are also the fun questions.
Sure.
So I'm gonna start with the fun ones. What is your favorite book and why?
Oh god. Okay, so I actually, in preparation for this, I went to my bookshelf and I stood there for 5 minutes trying to be like, what book am I most drawn to? Like
Yeah.
trying to, because if I could, I would just show you my whole bookshelf. But I,
Just bring us on a tour of your apartment, like cribs. Yeah.
um, the one that I go to the most, and like it's a young adult children's novel, but so what? Um, Diana Wayne Jones' Howl's Moving Castle. Most people have seen the Studio Ghibli
I
film.
do admit I've seen many a time the Studio Ghibli movie, but I haven't read it. But I'm glad you
Yeah,
did that.
and like
Yeah.
as you can see, this is a very battered copy. The spine is held together with Scotch tape.
Which shows
um,
you love it so much.
Yeah, exactly. Even if it's something that you read when you're younger, like I bring this with me anytime I travel because it's kind of like my safety blanket now. And it's just such a witty and funny and like really well written, fun, magical book. And so
Hmm.
I think that's probably my favorite.
Phenomenal. On a similar vein, what fictional character or or fiction writer do you relate to most? Those are kind of two questions, but you can pick one. If like me, I would have a very hard time answering one of those. So how about
Yeah.
yeah, whichever one you want to
Okay.
answer.
Um, huh. I mean, a fiction writer that I really like is Neil Gaiman. He just, the fantastic worlds that he creates and
Yeah.
shares with us are really awesome. But again, I'm not sure if I can relate to him.
Yeah, I guess yeah. Or just like which
Yeah.
one do you I don't know.
Mm.
Yeah. Which one do you
Um, hmm.
he's a great
But
figure.
I think in terms of, I'd like to say I can relate to Elizabeth Bennet from Pride and Prejudice. That is probably a pretty, I'm sure a lot of people feel that way.
But it's such a I mean, cuz I was thinking of that yeah, cuz I don't know, like maybe this is because we're so sort of like surrounded by her, but I was also like I feel like when I'm asked like which fictional character, I immediately think of Elizabeth Bennet or just an Austen
Yeah.
character in general, just because I feel like
Yeah.
they're kind of such an aspiration in a way. I mean,
Yeah.
especially Elizabeth Bennet. So yeah,
Mm.
I think that's a great answer.
Thanks. Yeah. And then, okay, this is me bringing in like my work from the museum and like women in the arts sort of thing. But it's also kind of the fact that we so instantaneously go to Austin, I think also shows a need for more women writers or to learn more about women writers because she's really kind of the only one that you're introduced to like
So true.
in her time period, you know, like
Yeah.
maybe you'll read the Bronte sisters, but besides Austen and the Brontes, it's like where are the women writers?
Yeah, yeah, who aren't
Sorry.
just sort of in that specialized educational kind of setting, where
Yeah,
you're just sort of
yeah.
introduced them
I
to
had to
these
bring
books.
that in. I'm sorry.
No, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, and that's something, and part of it, you know, because like I mean, we're English majors and we've
Yeah.
read literature, so we've read like Virginia Woolf, we've
Mm-hmm.
read a lot of the other sort of like other canonical female writers, but those aren't necessarily don't necessarily have the reach that Austen does, which I think
Yeah,
is
yeah.
part and I mean, obviously we see it much more with female writers,
Mm-hmm.
but I think spreading canon to a wider audience, but also just spreading literature to a wider audience, which I think is part of the reason, kind of breaking out of the academy a little bit, is something that I think
Yeah.
is what we're trying to sort of do with our internship with these questions about like
Mm.
what are you going to do with that, because I think part of what influences people asking that question is that they kind of find sometimes what we study a little bit inaccessible,
Yeah, definitely.
which is I mean, yeah, I want everyone to read To the Lighthouse because it's so brilliant, and I want everyone
I
to
almost
love.
pulled that from my bookshelf.
Yeah, because it's just such a.
Yeah.
It just it has everything in it, and I want
Yeah,
everyone
yeah.
to
But then people
experience
are
it.
like, I can't, like, the sentences are 2 pages long. I don't follow her, what she's thinking. And it's like, yeah, because it's train of thought and it's this whole movement and the
And
Bloomberg
it's
group. But then
messy,
it's
like
like,
you are. Like,
yeah,
it's really following that kind of. I mean, if you just think of like if reflect on yourself a little bit, it'll make so much more sense and train of thought. Exactly.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and yeah, I want. In conclusion, people need to read more women writers,
Yeah,
for sure, and
absolutely.
experience women artists, experience women
Mm,
in art, just
yeah,
everything. Yeah. So I'm glad you brought
definitely.
that in because that's very, yeah, that's a brilliant. I'm glad that's going in the interview.
Oh,
Um,
thanks.
yeah. And then I just sort of final questions, and this is just kind of ending on a sentimental note. Do you have, I mean, just piece of advice, reflection that you want to sort of extend to any English major or student of
Mm.
English?
Um, try as best you can to stay on top of your reading. I think in all
Agreed.
seriousness. Yeah, yeah. Like, um, you never know, even if it's a required class and it's maybe not something that you're really jazzed about. Like again, the things I really loved were medieval studies and poetry, and everything else kind of in between, like all the required like American literature classes and world literature classes. Like definitely I definitely found myself enjoying them if I gave them a chance.
Mm-hmm.
Like one class that's really stuck with me was my Irish lit class that I took my senior year. And again, who would have
Mm-hmm.
thunk sort of
Yeah.
thing. So
Right.
just try to stay on top of your reading and stay curious and kind of just dive into things and give them a chance.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I love that we're ending with that. Um, yeah. So thank you so much, Ellen, again for
Yeah, no
participating in
problem.
this. This was really great, and I really look forward to hearing people's thoughts on it. I'll show, yeah. So and
Cool.
thank you
Yeah,
for yeah, thank you again.
absolutely. My pleasure.
All right. Well, have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. You as
Yeah,
well.
and let me know if you have any questions.
Sure thing.
Okay. All
Awesome.
right. Bye, Ellen.
Bye.